you know, after a while, you got to thinking, why is all this? And nothing was happening. It was just back and forth, back and forth.
More and more, the war turned into a series of battles for barren hills where lives were exchanged for real estate.
We had a terrible fight on a hill called 400, and I had 8 men killed. And they were my brothers, and so it was a terribly emotional experience for me. I can remember hugging one guy that was dead, and it got to me. You know, and I remember the doc, Jimmy Mayamura. They couldn't get a vein. He was badly hit.
And so people gradually, after the casualties started mounting, people gradually came to turn pretty much against our involvement in the war out there. Maybe it's the first time we had that kind of thing. That came much more to the fore later on in Vietnam, of course.
Many a mother was saying, why, oh, why is my son over there dying in a faraway land for a people we've never seen in a country we've never heard of? But, of course, freedom is not free, so the war had to be fought.
There was a friend of mine who went to the Korean War, and he was playing bass with me at the time. And I've only written one or maybe one protest song, and that was it. And it was about him having to go to war.
This is the battleground. Where Jimmy learned to kill. Now Jimmy has a trade, and Jimmy knows it well, too well.
Fighting and the peace talks dragged on. There were major disagreements among the parties over how to exchange their prisoners of war.
The communists wanted all of their prisoners of war, over 100,000, returned to them. But the American policy was, no, we are not going to have forced repatriation. If the communist does not want to go back to the communist land, we're not going to force him to do so. And it is to our humanitarian credit that we did not force them to go back. But the price we paid was heavy.
UN and American POWs were forced to remain in the horrifying conditions of prison camps in northern Korea and Manchuria.
They were probably mistreated more than some of us were in Vietnam even. And they put them in holes. They covered them up with mud up to their necks. They kept them in small rooms. It was thought control is what it was.
In our camp, in Camp 5, the rate of dying was horrendous. We had to get our boots cut off because we didn't, because the blood and everything we had in our shoes was frozen. I got caught stealing winter sneakers, and I was put in a bank safe, a concrete safe, until I confessed the errors of my ways in stealing from the Chinese people volunteers.
In 1953, some changes took place. Eisenhower had been elected as president, and of course about that time too, Joseph Stalin died. And shortly thereafter, the communists telegraphed that they were willing to sit down and finally reach some sort of a ceasefire, which was finally signed at Panmunjom on July the 27th, 1953.
They made the announcement that the truce had been signed and that we would be going home Needless to say, everybody was just ecstatic. It was just one of the greatest exhilarating feelings in the world. You know, you're coming home. You're finally coming home.
One of the bright spots in the grim business is the road back to self-respect, dignity, and the feeling of once again belonging to the race of free men after months of a nightmarish existence.
I dreamed of the whole time I was in the prisoner of war camp of vanilla milkshakes. I said, I want the biggest vanilla milkshake. You can put it over here in a wash tub if you got one. I got sick as a dog, but it was worth the wait.
Not all the soldiers came home from Korea. Today, almost 8,000 Americans are still listed as missing in action.
The first picture on this photo, and this is how I told the North Koreans, it shows us at a young age, about 1 year old. My brother and I slept in the same crib. This photo is the picture of Richard and I at Fort Lewis, Washington, where we were sent to join the 2nd Infantry Division before we shipped out for Korea. Now this photo shows my twin brother as a prisoner of war at Camp Number 5, we now know. Prior to this photo, we thought Richard may be dead. He was missing in action. In 1953, I was reading the paper where the truce had been signed and prisoners of war were coming home. We looked at the list, looking for my brother's name. His name wasn't listed. In 1999, I put my message on the internet looking for my brother, anybody that knew my brother, and I got a call from Ron Lovejoy from Nevada. And he told me that he knew my brother and they became friends. He says, well, that young man, Richard, died beside me in prison camp. Well, 48 years of searching finally paid off. I guess about the only thing I have now is to get his remains home.
Only in recent years have the North Koreans begun to return the remains of U.S. and UN soldiers. They are still pawns in the continuing peace negotiations.
Well, I got his picture beside my bed. I look at it every night and say a prayer. And he's with me all the time.
We have a favorite story that Korean veterans tell. A guy goes to Korea, pulls his year there, comes home, and goes back to his job, and everybody says, where you been? You been sick? Our people considered a war that we didn't win. They saw no, quote, victory. And that's simply not true. We didn't go to Korea to win a war. We went to Korea to stop armed aggression. We succeeded in that.
Public support for the Korean War was never as strong as it was for World War II. Soldiers and sailors came home and rejoined their families, but they were not fully recognized for their efforts.
The people didn't look at us as doing a job in protecting democracy. They looked at us as if we did something wrong.
I'll tell you how it was different. When I came back, I went to visit people I'd known all my life, a girl that I'd grown up with from kindergarten on. I got there 8 minutes of 9 in the evening. And they said, oh, we're so glad you're home, Chris, and all of this. And then I wanted to tell them what it was like to have been in Korea. And they said, wait a minute, we'll talk afterwards. I Love Lucy is coming on now at 9 o'clock. I couldn't believe it. I was so flabbergasted, so angry that I walked out of the house. It took me like 2 years to be able to talk to those people again.